right, my English teacher friends, Kristian Kuhn coming at you again, affectionately known as the Bob Ross of composition. And up my sleeve, I have a writing workshop entitled, I Want You to Read Both Sides of a Political Meme. So as we head into the election cycle here, as we stare down the barrel of the November elections, I kind of wanted to teach my kids how to read the modern day contemporary leaflet propaganda. I think they get barraged by this stuff. And especially with how divided our country is politically, I think it's really important practice, intellectually, academically, to look at arguments from both sides. I think we, as a nation, have kind of closed ourselves off to that. We get so deeply rooted in our convictions that we kind of turn a deaf ear to the opposing viewpoint. The other thing, too, in terms of why I'm making this unit is I teach in New York State, and Governor Hochul has come out with state-mandated media literacy. And I have found it to be really biased in its presentation. Obviously, it's a Democratic state, it's a liberal state. And I have found that curriculum not to be the best. So I want to do a very fair and balanced media literacy unit. And without further ado, let me jump in. I will present the whole thing to you from start to finish. Before I do, please subscribe to the new YouTube channel. It's called Kristian Kuhn, the Bob Ross of composition. Tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell your students, spread the word far and wide. Leave comments, hit the like button, help me beat the algorithm. All the slides that you're going to be shown here in this presentation are down below in the video's description. Feel free to download those. And then just as another aside, know that I offer a lot of professional development opportunities throughout the calendar year. So I'm a lead teacher for the National Writing Project, and I do a whole bunch of PDs with applied practice, perfection learning, NCTE. But as a side gig, a side hustle, I do go to districts and host PDs in Zoom. And I love this meme. I just can't get enough of these staff development days. They definitely improve my teaching. Said no teacher ever. And just this morning I looked at my email and we had the invitation for our first 3 staff development days to close summer and open up the new academic year. And I think, like you, I say going into my 23rd year, yuck, ugh, do I have to? But yes, we do. So I can guarantee you that my professional development folks say, I really like that. I really got a lot out of that. That changed my teaching. That changed how I view composition. So if you want, you can drop me an email at teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com and we can talk further about things. I also have a website, www.teachinghowtowrite.com, that has a listing of a lot of the various PDs that I do. So let's take a look at the rationale for this. And I've kind of already alluded to it a little bit, but I'll unpack it thoroughly. Without question, political memes have become a modern form of old school leaflet propaganda. And given our nation's stark political divide, plus the endless newsfeed barrage, ascertaining the truth has become a daunting task, especially in light of the fact that there's so much media bias. One of the main reasons why the political divide is as pronounced as it is because many citizens do not consider and or factor the opposing viewpoint from a position of genuine curiosity or intrigue. Instead, one anchors their truth to their preconceived notions in a manner that closes them off from engaging in true intellectual inquiry. So let's unpack this before we see this specific task. One thing that I want to challenge students and teachers on is this, that it's really hard to ascertain the truth these days. And, I probably should have said this earlier. So I don't want people to know my political leanings, and I don't think you will at the end of this presentation. And I always tell my students, I'm like, if you think you know how I vote, then call the Board of Education and let's have a meeting and get me fired, because I really don't think that it's teachers' jobs to soapbox and to indoctrinate. And I feel like I always do a very good job of presenting both sides of the aisle. And I'm going to intentionally, in this particular presentation as well, I never want kids to know my politics. And back to that concept of the truth and the rationale here. It's really hard to, say, for example, watch CNN and get the truth. And conversely, it's very hard to watch Fox News and get the truth, or listen to Joe Rogan or Alex Jones or Russell Brand or Dr. Jane Ruby, right? It's very hard to know what the truth is today, in particular because there's just this endless barrage, and it just becomes a talking head vacuum after a while. And it's really hard to ascertain the truth. And especially in political memes, if you're not flipping them over and looking at, them from, both sides of the stone, both sides of the rock, instead of looking at everything with this monolithic eyeball of it is the truth, it's very hard to get to the truth. So in terms of the specific task, this is what we're going to do. For this exercise, you're to choose one political meme and unpack its truth from at least two differing angles. Turn it over like a coin and interpret it thoroughly while giving a nonpartisan, objective analysis. So what I'm going to do is show you how I run this exercise from start to finish for teachers to get a sense of how to execute it as a lesson plan. I'm also going to Bob Ross my instruction and paint that essay for you. So next to that ballot box, you notice that there was a number 4. It's just going to be a 4-paragraph essay. So intro, one side of the meme. Maybe it'll be like a liberal interpretation of the meme. And then flip it, body paragraph number 2, a conservative interpretation of the meme, and then tag a conclusion paragraph on it. So by Bob Rossing your instruction, this is what I mean. I love it when teachers position themselves as the expert writer in the classroom and provide a lot of models and exemplars for their kids, a la Bob Ross. He would come on to the screen for the joy of painting and say, "Hello, happy little people. Today we're going to paint," etc., etc., etc. And then he'd get to the canvas and the easel and paint with you. It's a demystifying process. He used heuristics, something known as the wet on wet technique, every single time he painted a natural landscape. And for those that are familiar with my work, you know that for our introductory paragraphs, we use a heuristic known as the declarative thesis or the inverted thesis. And that's what I'm going to model in just a second. And then all body paragraphs, regardless of the expository mode, I equip my students with something known as the syllogistic method heuristic. It's an Aristotelian model, comes from Aristotle, and we build all of our body paragraphs that way. So I'm going to build us towards that essay once I kind of debrief the setup and arrangement of the unit. So again, I just really want to emphasize this. Not yours, but theirs. Be objective and be unbiased. Kids don't need to know your truth. They need to figure out their truth. That's kind of one of the main points of this exercise, right? We're not here to soapbox. They can figure it out. So in order to do this, you got to mix up all the ingredients, and you'll see what I have in just a second here. A little bit of old school, new school, left, right, and in between. So have a wide variety of your memes. And I think the easiest way to do this, and this is what I did for my summer school kids, was I sent them on a mission to the adults in their lives, and some of them even are politically engaged themselves. And I had them ask moms, dads, aunts, uncles, grandparents, hey, go back through your Facebook or your Instagram. What political memes did you give a thumbs up to? And we were able to gather a bevy of memes this way. So what I had them do was, ask this question to the adults in their lives, and then to send me the meme to my Google email account. And then what I did was I put the memes into this Canva presentation. And I'll show you what we have from a class of 18. So this first one here says, and now it's time to go over the carefully selected stories that have been chosen to manipulate your emotions and thinking. So I unpacked a number of these for students just to demonstrate the exercise. And my essay is actually going to be about this meme, and I'll kind of front load that a little bit for you. So I took it from the perspective of, all right, CNN has their truth, Fox has their truth. And what I did was watch the news for CNN from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock, Fox 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock, and looked at what is truth on CNN and what is truth on Fox News. One's a liberal station, one tends to be right-wing, conservative-leaning. Very different sides of the truth. And what we can do is you can either make this an argument paper, kind of like FRQ3 on the AP Lang exam, or FRQ1, which is the synthesis paper. I'm going to model synthesis on this. So I had to do a little bit of research and figure out, where's the money trail for CNN? Where's the money trail for Fox News? And one of the things that I discovered, and again, I didn't know this, it was pretty fascinating, is that Warner Brothers Discovery owns CNN, and 8 of its main principal CEOs are major Democratic National Convention donors. And then from there, if you follow the money trail even further, it's linked to Big Pharma. And the research that I conducted said something to the extent, and I have this in my model essay, like 92.4% of all commercials that CNN airs are Big Pharma owned. And it's like, why? Well, like, why is that the case? Oh man, it's fascinating. But Fox is likewise as guilty as having these money exchanges through various coffers and donors and entities. And it really skews and kind of paints what news gets depicted as truth. So follow that money trail. And that's what's going to be in my body paragraphs and my thesis for this particular one. I'll show you some of the ones that students brought in real quick here. So that's number 2. Let's just go through these real quick. 3, 4 is fascinating. Don't believe everything you read on the internet just because there's a picture with a quote next to it. Abe Lincoln, right? Fascinating. Here's number 5. A little Gatsby in there. Some Willy Wonka in number 6. 7 has one for Truth Social, Donald Trump. So the kids brought these in. I had 18 kids in the class. Well, Elon Musk and Don Lemon. And number 9, 10, CNN. Number 11, we had a great discussion about. This is a very rich one. A lot of my students wrote their essays about this one. 12 was interesting, get into like some facets of the economy. 13, it's kind of a neutral one. 14 was another class favorite. We talked about the idea of how media in many ways just pits us against each other, pins us against each other. 15, to what extent do we consume social media to the point where it deadens us? So you can see here we got a lot of pro-liberal, anti-liberal, pro-conservative, anti-conservative, a pretty good balance. I tend to be in a purple region of New York. Here's 17, and lastly, 18. So I think you can do this for pretty much every single one of your classes. Have them bring stuff in. And then, of course, I had a whole bunch too that I brought in just from scrolling and trying to keep it balanced. So what the kid does is they choose their meme, and then they got to go research it. During the process of unpacking the 18 memes that we just looked at, kind of had some talking points about, if you're going to choose this is what you're going to need to research. And students needed quite a bit of help with that. So, summer school kids too. So it's a little different. And again, you can either go argument a la FRQ3 AP Lang or synthesis FRQ1 style. So we're at that stage where I'm going to show you how to write the paper. And what I like to do in this process is, in a figurative way, open up the lid of my brain and paint my process. So I'm going to position myself as the expert writer in the classroom. I'm going to Bob Ross my instruction. And again, just to reorient you, I'm choosing the first meme. All right. And now it's time to go over the carefully selected stories that have been chosen to manipulate your emotions and thinking. So I kind of already alluded to this, but let's just unpack it. It's really important that the kid know their direction before the process of writing, before pen actually touches paper. So I'm going to have my introductory paragraph, but you can see I have little icons down here for GPS and road maps. I'm going to use this analogy quite a bit when I write my intros for you. You kind of need to know where you're going with the body paragraphs before you even write. So body paragraph 1, I'm going to assess that particular meme from the perspective of CNN. Body paragraph 2, Fox. All right. And then my thesis is going to be connected to those body paragraphs. So the question becomes, right? How do I write the introductory paragraph? Well, we can declare or we can invert. Let's graphically take a look at the declarative model. When you go this route, you literally declare the thesis. You begin with the thesis. Now, one of the things we're going to do, because it's only a 4-paragraph essay, is have 4 sentences for our intro. And again, those that are familiar with my work, you know that I usually go 4 sentences for my intros. But the key with this is you got to set the GPS. You got to drop the seeds for the line of reasoning. Give your reader a compass and a road mapping. It's kind of like saying, hey, reader, I'm going here and here. Right? You don't want to be dogged about it. You're hinting. Right? You're kind of alluding to where you're going. So typically in like past videos, I called that dropping the seeds of the line of reasoning. And one of my summer school kids said, hey, Mr. Kuhn, isn't that kind of like, set the GPS, roadmap, compass? And I was like, I'm going to steal that from you. The other thing too is it is an academic paper. So we do want to see a decent amount of tier 2 level vocab. And all I mean by that is your average run-of-the-mill SAT level caliber words. And then you guys know that I run word study academies where we go over all that tier 2 level vocab. But I also run nuance academies in which we carefully study Strunk and White's seminal text called Write It Right. And in that, in particular with sentence constructs, they have rule number 18. And they make the assertion that there's 12 different sentence types. So if you were to write a sentence for me, just a straight up like independent clause, I could rewrite that 11 different ways in accordance to Strunk and White's teachings. But here's the kicker. With the 12 sentence types, you can pattern them 20 different ways. And I'm going to do, just in my modeling, I'll do some syntactical ninja stuff and show you and your students how we can get better voice rhythm flow once you can manipulate those types and patterns. Now, we can invert this and just flip it on its head. And in this case, you end with the thesis. So you probably begin with your context and background. Call it what you want. Set the GPS, seeds for the line of reasoning, the roadmap, the compass. Same old stuff with the tier 2 level vocab and the sentence constructs. So let's paint a few intros. I'm either going to declare or invert, and what I'll do is I'll read it from top to bottom, and then we'll unpack it together. So just get a sense of how I do this, and again, I wrote these. The truth of the matter is this. Every single news outlet in America has been bought and paid for. As such, they are not beacons who impart truth, but instead corporate conglomerations that spew bias, partisanship. In every instance, the story being spoon-fed to the public is controlled by big pharma and political donors serving their own self-centered interests. And even though CNN purports to be a purveyor of truth, and likewise Fox News for that matter, what gets reported as being fact is tainted by greed as well as the tug and pull of financial strings. So let's talk about this. I think it's difficult for kids to understand the concept of the GPS, the roadmap, the compass, the seeds for the line of reasoning. So because I said CNN first, that's the first body paragraph. But what do I need to talk about? Well, I've hinted at this already. The idea of follow the money trail. And, ultimately, if you follow that, it goes right back to big pharma. And then second body paragraph, I'm going to talk about Fox News. And likewise, do the exact same process. That's what I mean by look at both sides of the meme equally, in terms of just an intellectual inquiry. Like, try not to have any favoritism. Try not to have any political allegiance. Just objectively present an analysis of that meme. Let's start easy and talk about vocab. So some tier 2 level vocab. So things like outlet, beacon, impart, conglomerations, partisanship, spew, bias, right? Spoon fed. Anything like that works really well. Purveyor gets us to tier 2 level. And one of the things that I like to disabuse my students of is this. The idea is not to use $1 million words. That's not good writing. The student needs to find the sweet spot, the wheelhouse of their vocab, of their lexical level, and stay to that. So don't invent words, don't sound contrived, don't sound forced, don't sound pretentious. Find that sweet spot in your voice. In terms of sentence constructs, take a look at that first sentence. That's interesting. And that's something kids typically don't do. There's a colon dropped in there, right, to introduce the thesis. And then one of my rules is this. Repetition is the bane of the composition writer's existence. You don't want repetition at sentence level, especially in the introductory paragraph. So sentence 2 should be different and varied from sentence 1, which it is. Sentence 3 should be different than 2 and 1. And sentence 4 doesn't want to parallel or mirror sentence 3, right? So you want some distance from a sentence construct, a sentence type, before you reintroduce it. And I usually like to get like 2 or 3 minimum away from it before I reintroduce it. So that's kind of how I would do an introduction. I'll do it again. And it's really important to emphasize this with your students. Know thy direction. They can't be figuring it out in the midst of writing. Otherwise, it's going to get waylaid. It's going to be a hot mess and probably not have a very clear sense of directionality. So here's another one. And again, I'm going to use the same meme. Media bias is a bit like an onion. One must first peel back multiple layers to get the motivating factors that fuel the narratives being released for public consumption. And in doing so, it becomes clear that the truth is largely tied to a money trail that lugubriously pads the linings of certain individuals' wallets. As such, media outlets cease to be bastions of unbiased objective news, but instead corrupt corporations that swear their allegiance to the hands that feed their greed. This is especially true of both CNN and Fox News. All right. So in number 2, I want you to see a pattern from number 1. The main word in the prompt is truth, truthiness, true. So it's really impossible and also imperative that the thesis be focused around the concept of truth. So use the word explicitly or use a synonym or an approximation of it. So that's a good little tidbit for students, and that's one of the importance of Bob Rossing your instruction in writing these. I was like, oh yeah, my thesis has to be anchored in the language of the prompt. And that's always true of FRQ3 and FRQ1 for our AP language kids, and even for the on-level kids that are doing argument, persuasion, and synthesis. That's just kind of a tacit rule. So in this one, I'm doing, again, some really cool things at sentence level. Oh, look at that. Pattern. I used a colon in the first sentence, right? So at this stage of my instruction with my kids, we were working on colons and kind of that jump, pause, start contraction in sentence level. Why do you use it? When would you use it? When, you're not just listing something. So that's pretty cool. And my vocab's up. All the sentence constructs are different. And you also can clearly see the seeds from my line of reasoning, the roadmap, the GPS, etc. So let's hammer that idea one more time. Know thy direction. Set the GPS. Know exactly where the body paragraphs are going. And again, you don't want to be dogged, but you hint at it in the introductory paragraph. All right, so I'm just going to model the intro twice. Usually I do it like 3, 4, or 5 times in these videos, but for time's sake, And I trust teachers can figure it out, and you guys can Bob Ross for your kids as well. So we're at that place in the essay where we've got to ask ourselves, so how do I write the body paragraphs? And again, always, 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 kids can go syllogistically. They can write syllogistic body paragraphs. I'm going to do a quick fly-by-night overview of the syllogistic method. For those that are new to me, you can take a deep dive into my YouTube channel, and I have, videos that exhaustively go over this. And again, it's rooted in the Aristotelian tradition. Aristotle, funked this up, and he ran a school called the Lyceum. And you have some seminal text at which you can see this work out and see it at play. One is Plato's Republic, where the essential question is, what is justice? And all these philosophical think tankers and scholars step to the proverbial mic and they drop their definition of what justice is. And Aristotle noted the really gifted orators, the kids that could keep like tight lines of reasoning and be super cogent, were using kind of a mathematical formula that he coined the syllogistic method. And all it means is that you go from premise to conclusion. And in this, if I were to say to you as a hypothetical instance, arsenic is deadly, right? You would all nod and say, yup, Kristian, you are right. And then if I give you some context, like textual support, and say, yeah, we have this rat infestation in my house, and in particular, the rats were congregating beneath my kitchen sink, so I put arsenic beneath my kitchen sink. This morning I went in to make a cup of coffee, and Skipper, my little dog, had his muzzle and his gruzzle beneath the kitchen sink, and he pulled it out, and there's white stuff all over his whiskers. You guys would say, uh-oh, Kristian, logically, rationally, that's not going to bode well for your dog. Little Skipper's going to die. And that's a syllogism. 1 + 2 = 3, right? Very logical, very cogent in its progression. So how do we morph that into a heuristic for the purposes of doing synthesis? And I know some of you might want to go the route of argument. It's literally the exact same thing. The only difference is that the textual support in argument, like FRQ3, is going to come from the kid's head. It's going to come from their recall. My guys, I want to introduce to the research method. So they gathered 5 sources on their own, and I did the same to model it. So I'm going to be quoting from my sources in true synthesis spirit. So the first premise is going to be an argument that contains a why reason. Let me unpack that. Up top in the thesis, we don't get into our whys. We're just stating our position, right? Our thesis. Here's where we state the why, right? Why do I feel this way about CNN? Why do I feel this way about Fox News Channel? And you can see that I put a little 3 next to that. I want this to be 3 sentences long. So the first premise is always going to be 3 sentences long, no matter the expository mode. Here's my rationale. It keeps the argument central. If I start getting into my sources in sentence 1, 2, and even possibly 3, I'm writing summary, I'm writing cliff notes, I'm regurgitating my sources, I'm telling the story of the sources instead of arguing, and that's the demand of the assignment, is to argue. Premise 2 starts at the 4th sentence, and it's the textual support in which we want to quote and or paraphrase. It's early in the academic year, and I want to have some structure, so I'm going to ask my kids to have 3 quotes and or paraphrases in this, all right, for synthesis, 3 quotes and or paraphrases. And then the conclusion of the body paragraph, and I want to be very mindful in articulating that. Body paragraphs need to be concluded. You got to link, echo, promise all the way back to the thesis and the prompt. So we're going to be talking about truthiness in the conclusion. And then you can see at the bottom of the screen that I have a 10/12. All of this is one paragraph. All of this happens in one body paragraph. So body paragraphs tend to be about 10 to 12 sentences long. All right. So real quick, the math, 3 sentences, first premise, a combo of 3 quotes, paraphrases for a total of 10 to 12 sentences. So we got to ask ourselves the question, what's a first premise look like? The first time I show you, I'm going to keep it basic and give you some sentence clauses that I give my students who struggle. Now, a lot of my students don't need this, but I do have some emerging writers that they struggle a little bit. So if a student says there is a reason why, or there are a couple of reasons why, by default they will articulate the reason why. It's like a cheat or a hack. It's foolproof, right? So let me give you an example of how this works. Again, we're going to go 3 sentences, hence the number 3 at the bottom of this slide. So I got to state a why. There is one principal reason that precludes news networks like CNN from putting forth the truth. Again, do you see how I'm anchored in the prompt? You got to use the language of the prompt. The fact that 8 members of their ownership group contribute large sums of money to the Democratic National Committee. Further, one must ask where the mouth of this money source exists. As stunning as this may sound, especially for this particular news outlet, Big Pharma is dictating what is and what is not deemed newsworthy. All right, so if we break this down into the language of a promise, like what's the promise of the first premise, we have to ask ourselves, what quotes must I have? What quotes and or paraphrases must I have? Well, ultimately, it's following the money trail into and out of CNN. So the Democratic National Committee and Big Pharma. So all the quotes and paraphrases must be germane and linked to that, right? So we got to deliver the promise, and we have to align our quotes and paraphrases to that exactly. So on this slide, we're still in the same body paragraph. We're just transitioning to the second premise, which is always the 4th sentence. In the 4th sentence, I either quote or paraphrase. Look at what I got going on here. Case in point, the ownership company of CNN, Warner Brothers Discovery, donated an estimated $38.9 million to the DNC during the last election cycle, in contrast to not a single cent to the Republican Party, source D. And I'm doing this very much like AP language, FRQ1. I'm not going to do MLA formatting. We just are going to print our sources and go A, B, C, D, E, right? We got 5 sources. So I quoted. You might notice that that's a pretty good embedded quote. How did I do that? How did I get it to be kind of silky smooth and conversational? Easy peasy. I do something called the 5-word rule. If a kid places a minimum of 5 words in front of the quote, keeps the quote relatively small, it should sound conversational. You also notice that I used an ellipses in there and brackets. Kids are going to need to be taught that, all right? So I quoted, I got to analyze it. With such financial discrepancies, one must really ask how this impacts and skews the manner in which news gets reported. Topically, stories that might paint the liberal agenda in a negative light do not make it to the front page. But on the flip side, 92.5% of what CNN covers depicts right-wingers as being corrupt, libelous, and an imminent threat to the democratic way of life, source A. Same thing, I did the 5-word rule there. So one of the things that I model for students is, how much textual analysis do you need outside of a quote? So after that first quote, which was source D, I have basically like 2.5 sentences. And I want, again, to remind my students this: repetition is the bane of the writer's existence. And one thing that students do that's kind of a happy little accident is they only give 1 sentence of analysis out of a quote, or they don't even analyze it at all. So I want to model like, how much is enough, right? And there's no magic number. There's no set math for that. Sometimes I can do it in 1 sentence, typically 2, sometimes 3, but I don't usually go above 3 sentences. So again, we quoted, we have to analyze. As odd as it may sound, the motivating factors can be found not in what is and what is not reported, but in the commercials that are aired in between the news segments. Remember, we talked about Big Pharma in the first premise? I got to get there. Look at this. Money exchanges, if one follows the trail, seems to always lead to the nation's biggest pharmaceutical companies, which explains why 94.3% of all commercials aired for this network promote prescription drugs, source C. And I just paraphrase that, right? So I want to show my students that even repetition in terms of quoting and paraphrasing is bad, right? You got to keep a balance. So you don't want to quote, at the exclusion of paraphrasing, or paraphrase at the exclusion of quotes, right? So that's not a really good practice. So balance those out, teeter-totter those. So on that slide, it says, got to conclude. All right, let's cross the finish line. The conclusion, again, it's still in the same body paragraph, usually takes 2 sentences. Sometimes I'll need a third. So here it is. Got to go all the way back to the prompt. So I need to say something about truth in this. Clearly, money drives the agenda, and even further than that, the manipulation of news stories drives how people vote, which dictates who maintains power and controls the shots in our country. For as long as politicians, donors, and corporations lie in bed together, the news will never present the truth, but instead the biased perspectives of the social elite. All right, so what's fascinating about this is some of you might read this and say, well, that's biased, Kristian. Of course, because I had to do research in order to do it. And that research is biased. Where did I get it, right? So you get into all these fascinating wrinkles and nuance with kids about trusted news sources. Who do you trust? Who's got license, on the truth, etc. And it goes back to the origins of this assignment, the genesis of the assignment. It's really hard to get the truth. So I wrote that. Do I believe it? It doesn't matter. I'm just modeling how to do it. So the question becomes this: what do I do next? Because we need an intro, 2 bodies, and a conclusion. You literally just hit replay on the syllogistic method. I'm going to show you a first premise that does not use those stems of there is a reason why, or there are a couple of reasons why. Just how to authentically do it without the training wheel and the scaffold. So I got to transition into Fox News. So I might do something like this. And yet, right? I love transitioning with conjunctions. I think it's very skillful, and a lot of good writers do this. I've noticed. And yet, Fox News is as equally guilty, although the motivations are slightly different, right? Again, I want to be objective. I want to be, as, reflective as possible in this, and give credence to both sides of the meat. While CNN has a liberal bias, Fox News clearly panders to its right-wing viewership. The only difference is this: the source of the money pot and the mitigating factors of what gets purchased in the exchange of hands. All right, so I got to basically do this again. Keep the promise of the first premise. What quotes must I have? What paraphrases must I have? Again, I'm following the money trail. It's a little different for Fox News, right? But it's the same concept. So we're going to go 3 quotes or paraphrases, 3 quotes and or paraphrases, 3-sentence first premise, 10 to 12 sentences all in all. And that takes us to this, my friends. We got to wrap up the essay. We need a conclusion paragraph. So here are some stems that I use early in the academic year, and I explain it this way. The conclusion paragraph is kind of like the grand finale of a fireworks display, the all-encompassing theme, the big encapsulation. So any of these transitional clauses, like simply said, evidentially, in no other words, when it's all said and done, at the end of the day, work fine for that. It's kind of generic. Ultimately, I want my kids to wean themselves off of this for exams in particular. But here's a model of one, right? Just to Bob Ross it for you for this particular essay. At the end of the day, one's going to be hard-pressed to arrive at any semblance of the truth if they continually turn to biased cable news networks. Holy guacamole, do you see I'm in the prompt again? I said the truth. So you got to do that consistently. Stay anchored in the prompt. In every regard, CNN is a vacuum with talking heads pandering to the propagation of the liberal agenda. And conversely, the same can be said of Fox News, but with a pro-Republican bent. Given that this is the case, the truth will never be presented, but instead, a heavily skewed truth will become someone's tainted worldview and upheld as the singular and only truth. So you got a lot of truthiness down there. And that, my friends, is it. So again, let me just say this. If you would like for me to present to your department, or you want to work one-on-one with me or in a small group of your English friends, let's hook up and do some professional development together. I have a whole bunch of opportunities that you can pick and choose from. Drop me an email, teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com. The best thing probably, if you're interested, is hop on a Zoom with, just you or you and your buddies that are interested, or your department, and we can talk about specific packages and tailor custom make it to your specific needs. That's typically what I do. That's how PD is best. So happy teaching, happy writing. I hope you have a good political cycle here as we head into election season. And I will have more to come in the days, weeks,